Welcome to Education Forum. I'm Herman Badillo, Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the City University. The improvement of education affects all New Yorkers. This program will focus on the key educational issues and challenges before us all. My guest today is Alair Townsend, who is the publisher of Crain's New York Business, a weekly newspaper that is concerned with the business community and the economy in New York City and how the national and international situation affects the city of New York. Alair Townsend has a very distinguished career. She's a graduate of Elmira College and a master's degree from the University of Wisconsin, and she has a very distinguished career in Washington. But when she came to New York City, she was first budget director and then deputy mayor with Ed Koch, and she became the publisher of Crain's New York Business in 1989. Welcome to the program.
Thank you,
Herman. I wanted you to be here because we at the City University are very much concerned about how the graduates of the City University are perceived by the business community. And also, as you know, I've been working with the mayor on the elementary and secondary schools, and I'm perceived about and I'm concerned about how the graduates from the high schools are perceived by the business community. Tell me about the high schools first.
The high schools, I don't think, have a terrific reputation across the board. As you know, it varies widely. There are some high schools that are the equivalent of any other in the nation. Terrific high schools.
Bronx Science and Stuyvesant.
Stuyvesant. And then there are a lot of other ones throughout the neighborhoods that are very good. We don't all know their names. They're not out there with a national reputation, but they deliver a good, solid education. The problem is with a lot of other students who manage to graduate, if they graduate, and they're not really versed in the basics. Their reading, writing, and arithmetic, as they say, really are not high school graduate level, and that's a tragedy.
And of course, you know that I've been criticizing the concept of social promotion over the years because it leads to precisely what you say, and it makes those graduates, so-called, unemployable because they're not ready to perform.
I agree with you on that one. We're not doing them a service. When I was the budget director and then as deputy mayor, I had a long series of mostly one-sided conversations and memos to the school's chancellor at that time, asking the question, why are we not testing students all the way along, and if they can't make it, forget most of the other courses that they may be taking and concentrate on reading, writing, and basic math, and keep at it until they have those basic skills. I couldn't for the life of me understand why electives or frankly even history was important if they couldn't read the books. And so I think that it takes softening in the system, if you will, an elimination of some of the rigidities and requirements and must, to say to students and teachers, here are the basics, you're going to keep doing them till you get them right.
Do you think it might be possible to improve the situation if we get rid of principal tenure?
Oh, I'm all for that. Especially now that I am in the private sector. It's very important to me as someone who is running a business to know that I have some control over my managers. If they are not performing adequately, I can try to encourage them to improve their performance and help them the best I know how. But if they are not doing it, can't do it, won't do it, whatever it is, they've got to go. And same in the newsroom with reporters and editors. Now, schools are a terribly important institution in our society, and performance ought to be the standard, not longevity, not tenure, not any other thing.
Now, how do you find the graduates of the high schools in the city compared to the graduates of the high schools in the suburban areas?
I can't answer that directly. I've not looked at statistics. My gut would tell me that if you're talking about Scarsdale or Rye or the 5 towns on Long Island, that the average performance is better in the suburban areas. I think that's probably because they've had a higher quality education overall. And frankly, many of the students there in those communities may not come to school with the same kind of problems that a lot of our youngsters do, where they're learning English in school. where they may have had all kinds of family problems at home, not know if they're going to be able to eat or where they're going to sleep. I read about some of these children and I think, I can't begin to imagine how a child could concentrate on schoolwork with all of those horrible problems whirling around in the brain and in the emotions.
Well, you meet with the business leaders, and I know that you have many forums
Right.
at Crain's New York
Sure.
Business where different leaders come to speak. Are the business community leaders optimistic or pessimistic about the ability of the Board of Education to improve conditions?
Well, I would say fundamentally they're concerned. If you ask most business people, as I'm sure you know, the number one concern they have about the city of New York and conditions here, of course they're concerned about the cost of doing business, but education. For a whole variety of reasons, a number of them, like the phone company. You know, they bring in a lot of people every year. They spend endless amounts sifting through, filtering through hundreds of people before they can find people they want to hire, and then they have to train them and retrain them. It's expensive. It's much more expensive here than it is elsewhere. So they like that to get better. And I think they also have a sense that it's not fair for students to be so poorly prepared. Not that it's unfair to them as business people, it's unfair to the students. And for social justice, social stability, they like that situation improved. I'll tell you what, though, they really, really do support the higher standards that the state is putting in place across all the public schools
You mean
in the
that
state.
they'd be required to have a Regents diploma?
Yes.
Of course, as you know, they've lowered the passing mark of the
Yes.
Regents to 55, so
Right.
that's not encouraging from my point of view.
Well, I think they had a choice, perhaps. Do we say, okay, 5 or 8 years down the road, you'll have to pass the Regents exam, excuse me, or do they say, no, we want you to pass it sooner rather than later, but we'll lower the grade and we're going to raise that passing grade over time. There's concern that there'll be attempts to push those standards off, and they don't want to see that happen.
Now let's talk about possible changes. You've had editorials about charter schools. How do you feel about that?
I strongly support them. I know the arguments against them, that you know, we shouldn't be sidetracked with nice experiments that will only help a few children. We should think about system-wide reforms. And you've been in New York a long time. I've been here now rather a long time as well. How many system-wide education reforms have we seen come and go? A lot. So my view is children are only young once. And any child that we can get a better education right now, this year and next year, is worth it. So if only 1,000 children can do better in a charter school, if in fact they do better in a charter school, good, let's do it. And charter schools are going to be held to standards. If they don't produce results, they won't continue to exist. What's wrong with that?
Okay, now how about vouchers?
Vouchers. I have, oh, you're pushing all the hot buttons this morning.
These are the issues that are,
yes, I know.
controversial today.
Yes, they are. I started thinking I couldn't support vouchers. A kind of allegiance to the public schools, concerns about religious schools. Do you make vouchers available to them? And for the same reasons that I've come much more readily and easily to support charter schools, I've come to say, I think there are some experiments that might be worth trying. In Florida, I believe, what Governor Jeb Bush has proposed and is implementing is a system, and you can tell me if I get the details wrong, under which students in failing schools, schools not performing up to snuff, are the ones who are going to be offered vouchers. So never mind the creaming, the taking of the best students that others worry about. It would be students in poorly performing schools, and they would get the chance to get out of them. That seems to me worth doing, worth trying.
Yeah, well, we certainly have a large number of schools that are the so-called SIR schools, schools under Regents Review.
Right.
And they have been under Regents Review for a long time
Right.
because the students are not performing.
Right.
So that would be the same kind of school that would should be subject to the same kind of experiment here in New York City.
Now, having said that, I think it's also the case that there isn't capacity out there to accommodate every student in New York who might possibly want to avail himself or herself of some other opportunity. Right now, pretty much that's reserved for well-to-do families who have the money to get their kids in, and even many of them are struggling to find openings. So it's not something at this point that we could offer to everybody because there isn't a place, and maybe charter schools will begin to take some of those, to offer more opportunities.
Well, I think everybody now, not only all the candidates for the Senate in New York, but the president himself has come out against social promotion and saying that we have to have higher educational standards, and suggesting that they will cut off aid to school districts that don't implement the standards. Because I think we all recognize that education now is the new frontier in terms of achievement, and that unfortunately achievement is far too low, certainly for the business community. And I think you and Crain's understand that very well. Now, let's talk now about the City University. And we certainly recognize the problem that you've talked about, because we get a huge percentage of students who are so-called graduates of high schools, but they need remedial assistance in reading, writing, and arithmetic at the community colleges and at the senior colleges. What would you say is the perception of the business community towards the graduates of the City University?
I think that's a very difficult thing to generalize about. A lot of the community colleges have some two-year programs that are very technical and vocationally oriented that fulfill a terrific need out there in the...
Such as, for example?
Oh, I think some of the medical technology-related...
Health careers.
Right. And so they're providing people that industry needs, and they're pretty happy about it. I think there are graduates from some of the institutions, Baruch, for example, being one of them, where those graduates are pretty highly prized. Then it's mixed. It's mixed in between.
Now, what did you think of the Schmidt report that talked about the City University?
I think that report pointed out a lot of the issues and problems that have to be confronted, and I know you've been very concerned about remediation and the degree to which the resources of the university ought to be devoted to doing a job that should have been done earlier in time. And I'm sure you have been working very hard along with others trying to balance that against the American notion of a second chance, of what you do about immigrants, and what do you do for people who've been failed by that earlier system. It's a tricky balancing act, isn't it?
It sure is, and we'll be back after these announcements.
Save a place for me. Save a space for me in your heart, in your heart. Save a place for me, save a space for me in your heart, in your heart.
Every year, the United Negro College Fund helps thousands of students go to college. But for everyone we help, there's one we can't, not without the funds. Please support the United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
My guest today is Alair Townsend, who is the publisher of Crain's New York Business. We were talking about the remediation effort that we are now trying to get approved by the Board of Regents. Do you support the attempt we're making to ensure that we can eliminate remediation at the senior colleges and continue it at the community colleges?
In general terms, I do. I think that eliminate it totally, nothing in the senior colleges, that may be a bit too much for me. I might like some. Take somebody who's let's say, a Russian immigrant.
Well,
and
that's different because
whiz.
that's a English as a second language. You see, there we make an exception because we have so many immigrants, not just from Russia, but from Latin America, from Asia, and so the remediation aspect does not apply to those students, nor does it apply for the Sikh students, which are the students who have the most difficulties. But even beyond that, we provide for summer immersion courses, let's say a high school graduate who may be weak in one particular area and take the exam, the freshman skills assessment test in March or April, can then, under an intensive and free summer immersion program, overcome that obstacle so that they can enroll in September. But the idea is to indicate clearly to the business community that the students who graduate will be able to meet standards, and we felt that would be important for the future.
I think as long as there's some flexibility, and especially goodwill, understanding that life to this point of being trying to be a college student hasn't been the same or equal for everybody or easy, then I'm okay with it. And if there are opportunities in the community colleges to give people what they need to get them up to
community colleges are not affected. The programs will continue for community colleges because we recognize that, as we said earlier, so many of the graduates of the high schools are not able to perform at grade level. And as a matter of fact, one of the ideas that I've been pushing, and I hope I'll get your support, is to have remediation at the community colleges be made free, because it's not the fault of the students that they were automatically promoted. And the problem is that some of the students have to take so many remedial courses that they use up their tuition assistance, and then they drop out because they can't afford to stay in college.
That's right, and that's a problem. That's a big problem. I would support that.
Yeah, because we want to make a big push on that issue at the next session of the state legislature. It would make a big difference in increasing the percentage of students who graduate, because students who use up their tuition assistance drop out and then can't come back until much later, and unfortunately many of them drop out on a permanent basis.
Right. Of course, when we, I think, at our age, which is barely able to vote, we fall in that trap that nothing was ever as good as when we were students, right? The teachers were better, the students were better, and to some extent I think that's true in the sense of preparation. And it has to be discouraging to be in a senior college that you sacrifice to go to, you're working hard to get through, and you find that it's really not very good. It's not challenging. The teachers are teaching down to the lowest common denominator. Your fellow students aren't really challenged or challenging. So steps that make senior college really senior college, I think are appropriate and good.
Yeah, because you see what was happening was that students were being given remedial education to get them ready for college, and at the same time college courses for which they were not ready. Now that doesn't make any sense, because what happens is the one who's giving the remedial education passes the student because they feel they're trying. The one who is giving the college credit says, well, you know, they're at least trying because they're getting remedial education. That is not acceptable, because when you get to go out and look for a job, you have to be able to perform exactly. I mean, we live in the kind of economy where there are exact standards. And as I said many times, I wouldn't be a CPA if I couldn't pass the CPA exam, or a lawyer if I couldn't pass the bar exam. And this has to apply to all of the things that we teach, all the skills and all the professions at the City University. But one of the things that I'm doing is I am setting up a group of businessmen, and I hope that you will participate in that effort, businessmen and women, to orient us in the kinds of programs that we should have at the City University. Now, you are very familiar with the economy of New York City. If you had to look 10 years into the future and you were the chancellor of the City University, what kinds of programs would you emphasize?
Oh, that's tough, because if you look right now, what the economy seems to need is more of everybody. More accountants, more lawyers, more people with computer skills and software skills. You name it, including in my field. I mean, we are having a difficult time finding reporters. That you can just see supply and demand at work here. There's great demand, especially now since everybody has news sites on the web. So all of a sudden there are all these job openings, and so prices get escalated.
Because newspapers were going down in circulation, right?
Exactly, they were.
And people were looking to apply to television.
It was a buyer's market.
Yeah.
Just a few years ago, when New York Newsday closed, and the economy was in the dumps, and so ad pages were down, and so every newspaper, every magazine was smaller. You didn't need as many writers. Now the economy is booming. We are having our best year ever at Crain's New York business, as are many other publications. Plus, think of all the television stations, radio stations, and newspapers and magazines that now have something on the internet with content. Plus, places like thestreet.com with content that don't exist in any other form. They all need reporter kinds of people. And so supply and demand, prices are being bid up. It's amazing. Anyway, to get back to your question, I hope that a lot of emphasis is going to be placed on getting people ready for e-commerce, for the web, for internet activities. There's just an almost insatiable demand for people who are skilled and can create you a website, can operate it, can get your e-commerce business online, whatever it is. Very, very tight supply out there.
What are the projections that you have about the conditions in the New York City economy? Do you project that the national economy is going to be in trouble, for example? And if so, will it affect the New York City economy?
Well, you know, most prognosticators are awfully good at continuing current trends. They can't see around corners. And so all most of us can say is, how can this last forever? That the basic laws of economics probably haven't changed. At some point there'll be a downturn in the economy nationally that will affect us locally. When, how bad, and why, nobody really knows. Let's hope it's some distance down the road. As much as I worry about a general downturn or a downturn that is magnified locally because it's kind of unique to the financial markets. You know, the stock market starts to go down, people stop buying apartments, and it hurts Wall Street, and that hurts the city budget, and on and on. I also worry about one of the big generators of jobs in the economy, and that's new media, the internet, the web. A lot of these companies are existing, operating month after month, year after year, on money that they keep raising from the public, either from IPOs.
And the stock keeps going up, but the profits are not
zero.
Yeah.
And you look at some of them, and they have almost no revenues, and a lot of what they call revenues is barter. They say to me, owner of a television station, you know, give us airtime and we'll give you something. So these people aren't going to the public markets or to venture capitalists for money to buy other companies necessarily or to expand their operations. They're using it for their daily bread and butter. What happens if one day investors say, shouldn't there be some profits or more revenues here? How long can this last? And I think Amazon.com, the big bookseller, kind of investors started to say that last week, and they got clobbered. So if that ever is a widespread reaction, that would mean trouble here.
Well, you know, as a CPA, when I went to City College in Baruch School, we learned that the bottom line was profits. But some years ago, that changed, and the bottom line seems to be cash flow. You know,
or revenues, just revenues.
And now the bottom line isn't even that. It's just a question of how is the stock doing.
Right.
So the world is really changing. But I am concerned about another problem in the New York City economy, and that is what people talk about as to the structural imbalance of the New York City economy.
Right.
Because even though we have tremendous opportunities in the financial world, we still have a very high unemployment rate.
Yes, we do.
And we still have an especially high unemployment rate among our young people. And we still have a huge amount of poverty in the South Bronx and Harlem and East Harlem and Bed-Stuy, and that is offset by the huge incomes that many people in the economy have, especially those who live in the east side of Manhattan.
Right.
What can be done to redress that structural imbalance?
People have started to look at the poverty problem in a more detailed way recently and say, who are these folks? And to some extent, they're this is an oversimplification, of course, kind of two groups. If you set aside the elderly, some of whom have trouble on fixed incomes, you have continuing flow of new immigrants, and some of them have a tough time until they get oriented. But a lot of them get oriented and get going, and they'll be okay. This is not going to be a persistent thing year after year or generation after generation. Then we have a tougher group of people for whom low income, poverty, no firm attachment to the labor force has been something that's been going on for a while. That's a tougher group to deal with, and I think pushing on standards in the school begins to help that. Certainly the economy now is generating a lot of low-skilled or semi-skilled jobs as well. Think about retail stores and and restaurants.
But the web might take away a lot of those retail stores, right?
Maybe, you know, but that's sometime down the road. But we'll go up and down any street, restaurant after restaurant opening up. You know, it's been a classic way for people to get a job, get a foot on the ladder, and keep going. A lot of the financial service firms, in addition to all the other exotic skills they need a lot of people to just do things that are not that intensive in terms of the training required. Things are out there, and what we have to do is get a lot better at connecting people to them. And frankly, I think the welfare reform programs in place are going to making that connection more urgent on both sides, for business and for the people who've been on welfare.
Well, that's a continuing effort, and unfortunately, we're out of time, so we'll have to continue some other time. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can reach us by email at our website, www.cunytv.cuny.edu, or write to us at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016. We look forward to hearing from you.